this is his biography.
Get out there on election day and vote for your future.
Reporters label most of his speeches tired, hackneyed, and they write that the crowds are curious but uninspired. One national poll says Truman is so far behind that it's foolish to continue sampling opinion. But then in Detroit, Harry Truman begins hammering away at the Republican-controlled 80th Congress.
It's the congressional elements that made the Taft-Hartley law are allowed to remain in power, and if these elements are further encouraged by the election of a Republican president, you men of labor can expect to be hit by a steady barrage of body blows. And if you stay at home, as you did in 1946, and keep these reactionaries in power, you'll deserve every blow you get.
Truman is hitting his stride, but he leads a badly split Democratic Party. He has enraged the South with his liberal civil rights platform, and some Southern Democrats have organized their own party. They are called the Dixiecrats. South Carolina's Governor Strom Thurmond is their candidate for president. Thurmond can't win, but he can take votes away from Truman. A one-time Democratic vice president, Henry Wallace, now heads the Progressive Party, and he expects to draw liberal Democratic support away from Truman in this election. The Republican candidate, Thomas Dewey, is delighted by the three-way Democratic split. He is the overwhelming favorite, and his campaign is a study in confidence and complacency. But Harry Truman refuses to believe he's beaten. He loves to campaign. Writes one reporter, Truman's swing around the nation closely resembles a one-man circus. On the grinding schedule. His exhausted staff find it hard to keep up with him. But I like it, says the 64-year-old Truman. I even gained weight on the trip. Even at tiny railroad junctions, he goes all out. He slashes away at the Republicans and their candidate. They're gluttons of privilege, he declares. They're cunning men with a dangerous lust for power. Plush Victory Special carrying Tom Dewey makes the Truman train look like a Tunerville trolley. And wherever he stops, Dewey draws large crowds.
I pledge to you that on next January 20, there will begin in Washington the biggest unraveling, unsnarling, untangling operation in our nation's history.
The decisive battle has arrived. The people are going to have to choose one side or the other. The Democratic Party and I have nothing to conceal. We are proud of our record. All right, I'm doing it.
Near the end of the campaign, Truman invades Dewey's own backyard in upstate New York. Even the weather turns against Truman. It's typical Democratic weather, he says. But he's heartened by the large crowds that show up despite the rain. Pollsters and reporters are still unimpressed. Truman has traveled 31,000 miles and talked to 12 million people, but, say most observers, it isn't enough. Truman's party is too weak, they say. The Republicans will sweep everything. Election Day, 1948. In New York, the confident Republican candidate arrives at the polls. Harry Truman returns to his home at Independence, Missouri to cast his vote. Now he says there's nothing to do but wait. The decision rests with 45 million Americans. New York's Times Square, traditionally jammed with people on election night, is almost deserted. The election of Tom Dewey is a foregone conclusion. At Dewey's headquarters in New York, champagne flows freely. Victory is in the air. The first returns put Truman in the lead, but the Republicans aren't worried. And then Republican campaign manager Herbert Brownell brings good news.
We now know that Governor Dewey will carry New York State by at least 50,000 votes, and that he will be the next president of the United States.
But the race between Truman and Dewey remains close. And in surprising upsets, a number of Democratic senatorial candidates are being swept into office. Hubert Humphrey, the mayor of Minneapolis, wins a Senate seat in normally Republican Minnesota. Paul Douglas, a former college professor, becomes the Democratic senator from Illinois. Estes Kievolber, a political unknown, chalks up a Senate victory for the Democrats in Tennessee. Tom Dewey realizes that control of Congress is swinging to the Democrats, but he still expects to win the presidential race. At Democratic headquarters, party leaders who had given up on Truman now find it hard to believe that he is still very much in the running. He still has to win Ohio if he is to be elected. If he doesn't, the election will have to be decided by the House of Representatives, controlled at this moment by the Republicans. Of the morning, by less than 8,000 votes, Truman carries Ohio and the election. Later in the morning, Thomas Dewey makes it official.
I've sent the following wire to President Truman. My heartiest congratulations to you on your election and every good wish for a successful administration. I urge all Americans to unite behind you in support of every effort to keep our nation strong and free and to establish peace in the world.
Harry Truman has won the greatest political upset in the nation's history. At a victory dinner, he describes how he spent the momentous night on which he was elected President of the United States.
And I went back to bed and went to sleep. About 4 o'clock in the morning, the chief of the Secret Service came in and said, Mr. President, I think you better get up and listen to the broadcast. We've been listening all night. And I said, all right. And I turned the darn thing on the National Broadcasting Company. And Mr. Kelsenborn was saying, while the President is 1 million votes ahead in the popular vote, we have yet to hear from the... very sure that when the country vote comes in, Mr. Truman will be defeated by an overwhelming majority. There was Mr. Kelsenborn again. Then Mr. Harkness came on and analyzed the situation. I called the Secret Service men and I said, we better go back to Kansas City. It looks as if I'm elected. About 10 o'clock, I got a telegram which said that the the election was over and that I should be congratulated on the fact that I had won the election. And apparently it was too bad, but it happened.
Truman, the newly elected president, and his vice president, Alvin Barkley, returned to Washington. Says one newspaper that didn't give him a chance to win, "We are ready to eat crow whenever you're ready to serve it, Mr. President." I don't want anyone to eat crow, Truman says, but he cannot resist the temptation to make one last comment about his remarkable election upset.
I'm happy to be here talking to you once more from the same old stand. This is right where I expected to be. I don't know whether you remember it or not, but I told you on the 19th of February last year you were looking at the next president, and you are.
Harry Truman relaxes after the long grind of the campaign. He doesn't mind being seen in public looking very much like the average American on a vacation. January 22nd, 1949, President Harry Truman takes the oath of office.
In the coming years, our program for peace and freedom will emphasize 4 major courses of action.
On this chilly inauguration day, Harry Truman immediately outlines his 4-point program for guiding the nation's foreign policy. The Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan will be extended to help nations now threatened by communist aggression. One of the key provisions of Truman's program is the establishment of the first peacetime military treaty in the history of the United States.
We will strengthen freedom-loving nations against the dangers of aggression. We are working out with a number of countries a joint agreement designed to strengthen the security of the North Atlantic area. The primary purpose of these agreements is to provide unmistakable proof of the joint determination of the 3 countries to resist armed attack from any quarter.
Harry Truman calls the founding of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, one of his proudest achievements. Margaret Truman, because she is the president's daughter, has become something of a national celebrity. She must even hold an occasional press conference to satisfy the public's curiosity about her.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her.
A Washington music critic gives Margaret an unfavorable review, and the next day he receives a note from her enraged father threatening to punch the critic in the nose. Margaret Truman unwittingly becomes the center of controversy because of her father's remarks. "I've been accused," says Truman, "of putting the apple of my eye in a bad position. I don't think I have," he adds, "and neither does she, thank the Almighty." In the summer of 1949, a congressional committee investigates the activities of General Harry Vaughn, a military advisor to the president. He's part of what the press calls the kitchen cabinet, some of them Truman's hometown friends who have been given jobs in Washington. At the hearing, Harry Vaughn answers charges that he has misused White House influence.
My association with President Truman covers a period of some 30 years. Inquiries from persons having business with various government agencies come to my attention in my capacity as a member of the White House staff. At no time have I taken action as a member of the White House staff in exchange for a gift or other favor.
But the charges and the sensational headlines created by the Senate hearings cast a shadow of doubt over the Truman administration. Then, on the heels of this incident, from United States Senator Joseph McCarthy come charges that the Truman administration is coddling communists. The controversy stirred up by the Senate hearings brings a bitter counterattack from the president. Demagogues, crackpots, and professional patriots, he says, are pumping fear into the American people. On June 25th, 1950, the Republic of South Korea reels under an invasion by North Korean communists. President Truman faces a critical decision. Is Korea the place to draw a hard line against communist aggression?
If the United Nations yields to the forces of aggression, no nation will be safe or secure. If aggression is successful in Korea, we can expect it to spread throughout Asia and Europe and to this hemisphere. We are fighting in Korea for our own national security and survival.
Within 2 weeks, General Douglas MacArthur is named commander of United Nations forces fighting in Korea. The UN armies retake South Korea and push deep into North Korea, almost to the Manchurian border. Harry Truman decides to meet with Douglas MacArthur. I want to have a personal talk with the general, says Truman. I want to get to know him. On October 15th, 1950, Truman and MacArthur come face to face for the first time. We talked for more than an hour, says Truman. MacArthur assured me that all resistance would end in Korea by Thanksgiving Day. It was, he adds, a most satisfactory conference. December 1950. Unexpectedly, Chinese communist troops launch an attack into Korea from their strongholds along the Manchurian border. General MacArthur strongly advocates attacking the communist bases across the Chinese border. But Truman fears this will start a third world war. Permission, he says, is denied. Ordered by Washington to say nothing further on the issue, MacArthur nonetheless continues to agitate for an attack on the Red Chinese bases. Dean Acheson, the Secretary of State, warns Truman, if you relieve MacArthur, you will have the biggest fight of your administration. But Truman declares,
I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy. It was with the deepest personal regret that I found myself compelled to take this action. General MacArthur is one of our greatest military commanders. But the cause of world peace is much more important than any individual.
Within hours, Truman is involved in the greatest controversy of his career. Removing MacArthur from his command stirs a national debate.
I think it's very unjust taking MacArthur off as the Chief of Staff.
I feel General MacArthur should have been called home and that President Truman was right.
Hey, tell him something. He's a great general, that General MacArthur. I'm sorry to see him go. The President's action shows that he is resolved to stay out of a terrible, all-out war in China. The General's going to be a hard man to replace. I think he got a dirty deal.
I heartily approve of what the President has done. It's a darn good move.
We do not know where we're going in Korea. We do not know where we're going in China. MacArthur knows, and he's been fired.
But to Harry Truman, there was no alternative. Says the President, I could no longer tolerate MacArthur's insubordination. Harry Truman is nearing the end of his term. For 7 years, he's shouldered the enormous responsibilities of the presidency. He has proven to be a tough, independent, courageous leader. Early in the spring of 1952, Harry Truman finally answers a question everyone has been asking.
I shall not be a candidate for re-election. I have served my country long and I think efficiently and honestly. I shall not accept a renomination. I do not feel that it is my duty to spend another 4 years in the White House.
On Inauguration Day, 1953, Harry Truman escorts Dwight Eisenhower to the official ceremonies that marked the beginning of a new administration. He writes, "I had the troubled feeling that General Eisenhower had not grasped the immense job ahead of him. But there is little Truman can do at this moment. Mr. President has become Mr. Citizen." Independence, Missouri. This is where he grew up, where he spent the first 50 years of his life. And now Harry Truman comes home. Truman's father climbed to the top of this house and proudly hung out the American flag when a Democrat was elected president in 1892. But John Truman never dreamed his son would become president. Few people did. They called Harry Truman the average man. A Missouri newspaperman once wrote, "Truman is the average man. He understands the needs, the hopes, and the dreams of the average man. And that is his greatest asset." He had never wanted to be president, that he would have been happier as a senator from Missouri, a county administrator, or even as a musician. But he also said, when you can't do exactly what you want, take the next best thing and make the most of it. You can never tell, he speculated, what might happen. Mike Wallace for Biography.